Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with KC, a segment brought to you by the Keeping It Real with KC podcast. Here, the conversations are raw and casual with people from a plethora of backgrounds. And your favorite host, KC Phoenix.
All right, welcome to Conversations with KC. I am, of course, your host, KC Phoenix, and I have a guest on the line with me today who was kind enough to come in and let me have a conversation with him. I will go ahead and let that guest introduce himself now.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, KC. I'm Jack Allweil. I'm currently living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I heard KC on a podcast, and I was like, I'll give him a shout out, see if he wants to chat.
Awesome. Okay, now, Jack, I don't know if you know this or not. I don't do a lot of research on my guests because the whole point of this, the reason why I call it Conversations with KC is because I want it to be as if I'm meeting someone for the first time. I don't like to paint a picture of someone before I meet them. I allow them to do that as I have the conversation. So, awesome. I don't know much about your background. The only thing that comes to mind is Sam Rothstein. I don't know if you've seen the movie Casino or not.
No. It's been a while, but yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, he's really good with numbers because in the end, he actually ended up doing sports betting and all types of other stuff. So when you had briefly mentioned what you did, I was like, okay, so is he like Sam Rothstein or something like that? So I'm curious. So if you could tell the audience some of the things that you do.
Sure. Well, I guess a big turning point in my life was 2016. I lost my job, unfortunately, and I took a trip, and I call it my roots trip. It's where I went to see where some of my grandparents grew up in Poland and Hungary. And I actually met my wife in Vienna, Austria, believe it or not, on that trip. But one great thing that came from that trip was I started reading a lot. And it started when I went to Auschwitz, had a lot of questions, bought some books. And that's really, I was not a big reader at all growing up. And I started reading a ton after that trip. And some of the things I started reading were a lot of soccer books. I loved soccer growing up. And I thought these books that I was reading kind of blended my love for numbers with my love for soccer. And two of the most notable books that really influenced me were Money in Soccer and Soccernomics. And they were written by Professor Szymanski, who's still a professor at the University of Michigan in the kinesiology department, and then another guy, Simon Cooper. And they did a study on what countries use their resources the best. And I thought this was a very interesting study. They basically looked at things like GDP per capita, the population of a country, and then how many times that country had participated in international soccer games. And if you're ever at a, Jeopardy or any type of thing, Sweden's got the most international appearances. But anyway, they were looking at those three factors and trying to predict goal differential. And basically, the countries that were kind of batting out of their weight class would always outdo their predicted goal differential. And I got down the rabbit hole. I actually reached out to Professor Szymanski. He gave me a lot of his data. I thought if I could take this one step further and see if I could somehow take those predicted goal differentials and then convert them into probabilities for a win, a loss, and a tie. And pretty soon I had a little soccer model I was working with, and I tried to put it to the test in the 2018 World Cup and lost a little bit of money, and I wanted to figure out why, and I ended up writing this book.
Wow. Okay, so your focus is mostly soccer then?
I mean, for this was a passion project of mine. I have a day job too, but I work as an actuary by day. We're basically glorified budgeters. We're the ones that make sure there's enough money in reserves to pay out, well, in my case, annuity payments and oftentimes insurance claims.
Okay, so you're already working. Numbers is sort of like your thing, and that's what I was about to ask you, because when you were talking about that you were going down the rabbit hole and learning more about this, I was about to ask you, okay, well, do you have a background in numbers? Are you into algebra, calculus, or whatever particular, I guess you would say, math would help you balance out these equations? Because obviously I would think that you would need some type of training to do what you do.
Yeah, the biggest part for the soccer model was it's called VBA, Visual Basic. It's the language used in Microsoft Excel to automate kind of mundane tasks. So like if you wanted to just do loops, it's just another language. And Excel, I kind of learned it from my first actuarial job. So it kind of, it was just trickled over into a passion project.
Okay, so now that you're doing this, and you're saying that you wrote a book in regards to what had happened after you had done your journey, visiting, Poland, Austria, I'm missing a country.
Hungary, Czech Republic, did a little bit of everything.
Okay, so you were all over Europe then. Mm-hmm. is where you were at. And throughout that process, you were learning more about soccer.
Well, okay. So I was mostly reading on World War II while I was in Europe. And then over the next few months after I got back, I really got into reading. I mean, I can't even say I like barely read like growing up. I did not read much at all. And really? I just caught the reading bug after this trip. And
just out of curiosity, why didn't you read that much growing up?
It just didn't really interest me. I didn't like the stuff we were kind of forced to read in school. Didn't find it interesting, and I just figured I could read the Spark Notes most times. And I really liked playing soccer. That was kind of my focus when I was little.
Okay, got you. I was curious about that. Yeah, I actually read a lot when I was younger, but it wasn't school stuff. It was actually novels. Okay. I used to work. Yeah, when I was a kid, I was 14 years old. I started working in a grocery store. And I discovered this novel by Robert McCammon, I think his name is. And it was this book called Mine. And it was about this nurse that kidnaps a baby. Okay. And all this stuff happens. And I'm just like, oh, my goodness, this is so good. And then I discovered Terry McMillan, which is another author who's awesome. If you've ever heard of the movie Waiting to Exhale. Okay. Terry McMillan is the one who wrote the book for that particular movie. But yeah, I got bit by the reading bug at that time on stuff outside of school. But for you got bit by the reading bug after school is what happened. Yeah. And that's when you started learning about the soccer. And then, okay, now this is where I'm a little bit trying to bring all of this together. So you have a background in numbers. Mm-hmm. You're learning more about soccer. Where did it start to intersect for you? Because you're saying you wanted to learn certain things, but where did it intersect where it sort of went off like a light bulb in your head? Because I'm sure you have maybe had that eureka moment, like, wow, my background in numbers, I can really figure this stuff out pretty easily.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that I never really seen a study like this on soccer, and the fact that they kind of did a regression to goal differential, I really thought, yeah, there's something to that. And it's different. They did another study on player salaries, and this is something I think as Americans, we don't think of as much because a lot of our sports leagues have salary caps. So every team, the max they can spend is the same across the league. But in Europe, that does not exist. Their sports leagues are more capitalistic, actually. Like, wait
a second. You're saying that in the... Okay, you just threw me for a loop, so I have to make sure I'm processing this correctly. Because again, and that's the joke on this show, I do cover sports episodes, which actually, speaking of soccer, I found out about women's soccer when I did a sports story. But I don't really follow sports. So you're saying that in the American League, there's a cap on the salary, but in the European League, there isn't a cap on the salary.
Correct. Most American leagues, NFL, NBA, there is at least a soft cap, and in Major League Soccer, there's also a cap. It's more like socialist in nature. Like the owners are sharing in the revenues of the whole league, whereas in Europe, it's kind of switched. They're more capitalistic. It's a little more dog eat dog, and the owners can spend if they have money to spend. They can basically spend that. And
now, do the players get okay, let's say that I don't know that much about soccer in Europe.
Totally cool.
But let's say a team in Europe brings in a bunch of money. What's that guy? Cristiano
Ronaldo?
Yeah, that's it. Okay. I told you. I
no, it's
a little
cool.
bit, but not a lot. Let's say his team brings in a bunch of money. Would the money that his team brings in for them to come see them or whatever, are you saying that the way the system is set up there, they get to split all of that up?
Well, I'm saying like a Real Madrid might be spending, a couple $100 million a year on their players, whereas you go to another smaller team in England, their whole team might be getting, I don't know, 10 million. For the whole team. It just it depends. There's no, it's not uniform across the teams.
Okay, I think I see what you're saying. I'm processing this right.
And the players get paid more of what they're worth in Europe as opposed to like here. Because like if you were to get rid of the salary cap here, LeBron James, for instance, like he gets paid a lot. Like I'm sure a lot of people think he gets paid a lot, but he probably is grossly underpaid for what his actual value is. If they were to remove that salary cap.
Okay, interesting. I think what would be good is if they could just take a share of it, almost like with companies. You know how with usually corporations, with public companies, CEOs, it's based off of how well they perform. And at the end of the year, it's like, okay, well, the goal was to hit this target. I'll just say $100 million for the year. And let's say the company brings in $200 million. Well, then it would be great if they could say, all right, well, we hit the target and went above and beyond it. This amount that's left over, we'll take a percentage of that and then put it back into the league and do it that way. I think that would be pretty cool.
Interesting idea. I mean, a lot of the individual contracts have, I think what you're kind of talking about like an incentive structure, and some individual contracts do have incentives. Like, if, this player scores, 10 goals this season, they get a bonus or, so there, I'm sure that there are certain players that have incentives built into there, but I guess you're talking more as like a team as a whole. Is that kind of what?
Correct.
Yeah. And
right. Because I was going to say, some people, and don't get me wrong, I'm a firm believer in a meritocracy. So don't get me wrong on that part. What I'm saying, though, is that some players, like let's say you're a starting player, I think in I'm not fully sure, but I want to say in like the NFL, I think the starting salary is like 200 and something thousand.
I think I think the league minimum right now is a little over 400, but I could be wrong in that.
Okay, so let's say the league minimum's a little over 400. Then if you're coming in and you're doing the 400, but then you're a star player that was like the first draft pick or something like that, you get this huge contract, but then you have this other person on the team who they're not really a star player, but they're still in the NFL. I mean, you have to have some type of talent to make it onto the team, clearly. So I would think that there should be a pot that is divided accordingly. And it can be based off of, okay, who had the most intercepts, who had the most touchdowns, who had this, who had that, and bringing it that way. I'm just throwing it out there. Mind you, I'm just talking. But go ahead.
No. I mean, certain players have incentives built into their contract. I think a lot of people would argue it might not be beneficial for the team for so many individual incentives, because sometimes players might act in a way that might not always benefit the team. But I guess if your incentive is to score more touchdowns, you are probably helping the team. But but I think a lot of it's just it's been argued that a lot of those people on like the bottom part of the NFL, I mean, if that salary cap didn't exist and if that league minimum didn't exist, they would be getting paid much less. So and the stars would take the lion's share of the salaries.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. So go ahead and tell me some more about the book and some of the other things too.
So the book, so we actually ended up betting on the 2018 World Cup, and oddly enough, we did have France winning it, but overall on our bets, we ended up down a little bit. So I actually started thinking about how did I go wrong, or is there something that I did in my allocation that was just faulty? Was my logic faulty? Was I letting my emotions get too involved with some of the picks? And I kind of did unearth some of that, and that's kind of what led into this book. And I also sprinkled some stories from that European trip in after my mom said it was a little too quant for her, so I threw in some stories. But it's a great book. I basically wrote it with the idea of I wish something like this would have existed when I was younger, because I actually show a lot of the programming language that I use in Excel to set it up. It might be a little too technical, or some people might not care, but at least it's out there if people want to find it now.
Okay, well, how would someone find it?
Oh, well, the book is being sold on Amazon right now.
All right. So, and can you give the audience the name?
Yeah, it's called Make Better Bets. The subtitle is An Actuary's Quest to Bet the Russian 2018 FIFA World Cup with Excel.
Okay, awesome. Well, at least the members know where to go. Now, let me ask you this. Are you planning on writing any other books? Or are you planning on doing any other, I guess you could say, research or bets to see what happens?
Well, I wrote a journal to help actuarial students study for the exams, like a goal journal for the actuarial students. That's called 15 Weeks to Pass an Actuarial Exam. But I do plan on betting the next, so 2022, the next World Cup in Qatar. I plan on revamping the model a little bit. And like I said, how there's no salary cap in Europe, I plan on incorporating player salaries to help predict goal differential, and then use those to bet.
Okay. Now, also, I'm trying to make sure I'm covering everything here. Is this something that is still more of a passion, or is this something that you hope to one day let it be, which I don't know if you're allowed to say this because I know you have your regular job, and if somebody ever hears this interview at that job, but you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's definitely it's a passion. I only do this like once every 2 years. This is not something I like update, and I'm not betting the English Premier League on every weekend. This is mostly just for World Cups and big tournaments, and just to have a little fun, something to talk about. And
so you don't have any desire to ever turn it, like I said, if you should watch Casino again, because if you haven't seen it in a while, Sam Rothstein, cool guy, but you don't have any desire to turn it into something major, or even to take it to a computer level, because you wrote the book and you said the book was based off of a program using that off of a language that was used in Excel. Have you ever thought of possibly taking the information that you gather with that language and combining it with other things and creating your own computer program where somebody could possibly participate on a website? Because soccer is it's not as popular in America. It's become more popular, but actually, quiet as it's kept, UFC seems to be the thing on the rise right now. But as for soccer outside of the US, it's extremely popular. And I would think that if you were to create something online, there may be some money to be made off of that.
There very well might be. I guess right now it's a passion project. I mean, I will say, like, about 8 or 9 years ago, I did a similar program in Excel for daily fantasy sports on, I don't know if you've heard of like DraftKings and FanDuel. There are these like weekly betting things where you basically have like your own salary cap, and each player has a salary associated with him or her, and you basically pick them. You need to stay under your salary cap, and whoever scores the most points wins. And I did do something like that where I was optimizing to the salary cap and then printing out like the top 1,000 lineups for my program, and I was selling them for like $1 a week. I was pretty young then. I don't think I really knew what I was doing. Maybe if I had another go around, I'd do a little better. Plus, it's becoming like legal in a lot of states now. So
yeah, that's the other thing too. Gambling is becoming very popular, and something is telling me that I'm picking up two things. Just if you've listened to my podcast, you already know that I do tarot card readings and all types of stuff. We talk about everything on the show, and I'm pretty intuitive. Something is telling me that if you invested the time in doing something computer-wise, like with a website, you would be very, very, very successful in that. I'm not saying it would happen overnight. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that if you invested the time and gave it a go, I think you would surprise yourself.
Very interesting thought, Casey, and I might be going to bed tonight thinking about that.
All right, awesome. So now, do you have like a main website that people can research you, or you're just more?
Well, I have I do a little bit of everything. Like I have a blog. It's mostly personal finance. I read a lot of books and summarize them. That blog is called Fired to Fire, and my brother and I also started about a year ago a podcast called the Brothers on Books podcast, where we read books and discuss them. And we're pretty active on that. We release about every 2 weeks. And if anyone ever wanted to get in touch with me, I'm the only Jack Allweil on LinkedIn, I guess.
Okay. Awesome. And also, when you were talking about finance, let me ask you this as well. If I can throw this curveball at you. Are you ready for the crash yet?
So it's funny you should say that, but I know a lot of people are struggling with COVID, but I felt that my kind of COVID experience, or my gut check, was back in 2016 when I lost my job. And when that happened, I was fortunate that I had cheap rent, and that allowed me to go on that trip to Europe. And I also vowed to myself, as soon as I got another job, I would buy a house and rent out the rooms to basically eliminate my living expense and just be a little more robust in my life, be a little more anti-fragile, as they say. And I think that really set me in a very good position. I'd highly recommend any listeners, if you're young and you can deal with the roommates for a while, to try to look into a house hack, because it really set me up, and I learned a ton about real estate and just money management through that process.
Yeah, real estate is about to get interesting in the spring of next year, I have a feeling. So I'm just curious how all of this is going to play out. I honestly feel like there will be a lot of emphasis on food and water, though. I'm not into the cryptocurrency thing yet. I actually had a guest, Mark, I believe it was. It was a while ago, back in the summer, where we talked about cryptocurrency. And my spidey sense is still going off on cryptocurrency. I can't put my finger on it.
Well, I hope you're right, because I'm a big Bitcoin fan. So
yeah, I don't know what it is about cryptocurrency. I'm just not ready yet.
Okay.
I'm waiting. And especially they're doing a lot more regulation too with cryptocurrency. So I just want to wait and see on that. With real estate, yes, the housing market is about to have this moment, but the people who have the money to swoop in and grab the homes when they're dirt cheap. That's what I think Warren Buffett has, like $100 billion set to the side, because he knows what's about to happen. And of course, they're going to come in and buy everything cheap. That's what they do. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. But you have the podcast, you have the book. And you said people can reach you on LinkedIn. Sure. Yep. Is there anything else that you want to let the listeners know about?
I don't think so, Casey. We covered more ground than I thought we were going to cover. It's been an interesting conversation.
Well, that's why I always like to say, hey, start off with a conversation and see where it goes. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, Jack, thank you for coming on the show. Also to my listeners, do some quick housekeeping here. First thing is, to my listeners, don't forget to enter the Christmas with KC contest. You can do so by signing up for the email list. That will be in the details section. Also, KIRWKC.com, main podcasting platform. This podcast is carried on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Overcast, Bullhorn, Amazon Music, Audible, and several other podcasting platforms. Please feel free to listen to this podcast on whatever platform is most convenient for you. KIRWKC on all the social media platforms. And I think that covers it. Jack, thank you again so much.
Thanks so much, Casey.
All right, awesome.